Thank you everybody for attending. It's always fun to do these schools. It's a chance for you to get questions answered, learn what in the world do I do next now that I've just bought a pool this year. Randy is going to cover a lot of material. No doubt you'll have questions. There'll be a lot of opportunities at any point in time, really. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and he'll address those. Ultimately, it's a night of a lot of good information. When we're finished, we'll get your water tests to you and we'll walk through those with you and let you know how things are looking and what needs to be done to get those in shape and to really button up your pool for the closing process. But if you have any other questions, at the end, we'll answer those at the end as well if you've saved any for last. With that said, Randy Darby is our BioGuard representative and he's gonna steal the show tonight. So Randy?
Thanks, Tony. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Thank you for coming out. How many of you have attended one of our seminars before? A couple of you. Thanks for coming back. We pretty much do this twice a year, once in the spring on how to open your pool and how to maintain your pool, and then again in the fall on how to shut it down, put it to bed. This is only going to take probably 45 minutes depending on how many questions you have, and if you do have questions, just raise your hand. Let me ask you all a few questions before I get started. How many of you are relatively new pool owners, say less than a year or two of experience?
Not pool owners, but taking over.
Okay, and so my presentation's pretty basic. I'm not a chemist. I'm not going to be breaking down molecular structures and things. We're going to keep it real simple. Really, we have two goals. We want to make sure that your pool doesn't turn into the green monster over the winter with algae. And we want to make sure that you don't have any freeze damage issues. So the handouts that we gave you when you came in tonight, there's a couple of nice pieces of information in here. There's a sheet that goes over the winterizing procedures that I'm going to talk about tonight. There's a nice little checklist to make sure you know what products that you have at home. A little bit more comprehensive sheet on how to winterize your pool properly. One real important, this is a real nice piece on how to chemically clean your filter. So make sure you take these home and keep these handy. A couple other questions. How many of you use chlorine as your main sanitizer in your pool? And anybody have a chlorine generator on their pool? Chlorine generator, anybody use Soft Swim? Okay, that'll help me. And then types of filters. How many of you have sand filters? And any cartridge filters? Okay, so everybody's got a sand filter, right? What do you have?
It's called the paper.
Oh, you have a cartridge filter.
Cartridge.
Okay, well, that helps. So let's get started. And as I kind of outlined, really we have three main objectives. We want to make sure that when you open up that pool next spring, it's clear. You might have a little bit of residue on the bottom of the pool depending on how you cover the pool, which I'll talk a little bit about later. We also want to make sure that algae and bacteria don't grow over the winter, so we'll talk about how to prevent that. And then from a freeze damage protection standpoint, we want to make sure, we don't really care if the water in the pool freezes, but we want to make sure that if there's any water in the equipment, that it's either moving or evacuated from the equipment so it doesn't, if it freezes, it expands and then stuff breaks. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we'll talk about freeze damage protection a little bit later. And from a chemistry standpoint, this is what we want to avoid next spring when you pull the cover back and you've got the green swamp under there. This should not have to happen. In fact, a lot of new pool owners think that it's just part of owning a pool, that every May you have the swamp cleaning party. You really don't have to do that. It doesn't take a lot of effort to make sure that this doesn't happen. And that's really the goal tonight, to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the first thing is, we don't want to close the pool too soon. Anybody check their water temperature in their pool recently? What was it?
67.
67?
65.
65?
We keep ours running at 85.
So are you going to winterize your pool?
Yeah.
Eventually, so you'd want to turn the heat off,
Right.
obviously. But kind of what we use as the determining factor of when it's a good time to winterize the pool is when the water temperature gets below 65 degrees. The reason for that is the winterizing chemicals that we put in last a lot longer when the water is cold. And it's also when we recommend opening your pool in the spring, when the water temperature gets above 65 degrees, that's when we recommend getting your pool up and running, keeping an eye on it, test it once a week, because all the bad stuff can happen when the water temperature warms up. chlorine dissipates faster. Typically when the water temperature gets above 65 degrees, we're getting more sunlight, algae grows more readily. So even though you're probably not gonna swim in the spring when the water temperature's at 65 degrees, at least get the pool circulating, keep an eye on it so that we don't get the pool turning into the green swamp. Don't cover up any problems. If the pool's already green right now, or it's cloudy, we wanna fix those problems before we close the pool down. So after the water temperature's gotten below 65 degrees, we're ready to winterize the pool. And I see most of you, it look like brought in water samples tonight, which is great. Because the first step to really winterizing the pool is we want to get the water properly balanced. So really all the stuff you've been doing all summer, keeping the pH in balance, the total alkalinity, calcium hardness, those of you that use Optimizer Plus in your pool, we want to get all of these perfectly balanced, because if you think about it, that water is going to be sitting in there for months. If it's out of balance, it can cause some damage to the pool. So we want to make sure, especially the pH. Anybody remember from this summer, where do we keep the pH?
7.4 to 7.6.
Yeah, 7.4 to 7.6. That's kind of the sweet spot. That's where we want to keep it. If it gets too low, the water's aggressive, it's corrosive. If the pH gets too high, then we have the potential for scaling. We want to keep it in that 7.4 to 7.6 range. The total alkalinity, which will help you here in the store get that in balance, that makes the pH more stable. So the pH doesn't tend to fluctuate as much when this total alkalinity is in balance. And it's kind of funny, we actually want to have a little bit harder water during the winter than we do during the summer, because the water is more corrosive when the water's cold. So we actually raise the calcium hardness up a little bit during the winter to help protect the pool and the equipment. So it's real important that we get this water properly balanced. Again, correct any existing problems. Excuse me. We want to remove any dissolved metals that are in the water, like copper and iron. They'll test for copper and iron here in the store. If there's any copper and iron in the water, there's some products that we can put in to remove them. Because what happens, the reason we don't want metals in the water is they can stain the pool. Copper turns the walls of the pool kind of a turquoise green color. Iron's more of a brown color. So we get the water properly balanced. The next step, this is probably the least fun part of owning a pool, but a necessary part, the housekeeping chores. Pretty much common sense stuff. We want to skim the pool, so get your skimmer net out. We want to get that water as clean as possible. So skim the surface, vacuum any debris off the bottom of the pool, brush the pool. Get your trusty nylon brush out, brush the walls, the bottom of the pool. We want to get anything that might be growing on the walls or the bottom of the pool off, where the chemicals can either remove it or the filter can remove it. And then there's a couple of other things we'd like to do. Yeah, question?
Vacuum then brush, or brush then vacuum?
Brush then vacuum. Yep, brush the pool then vacuum. Couple of other housekeeping chores. This is the best time of year to chemically clean the filter. So the product we typically recommend in this area is called Strip Quick. And this is a liquid product. And if you've got a cartridge filter like you do, you just soak it in a solution of Strip Quick. It basically shampoos the filter and you rinse it off. Those of you with sand filters, we need to get this product into the sand filter. And there's a couple of different methods of doing this. How many of you have above ground pools with sand filters? So above ground pools with sand filters, it's probably the best place to add this is through the skimmer. So you turn the pump off, put the filter in the backwash position, turn the pump on just for a few seconds, or turn the pump on and pour this through the skimmer. This flushes it into the filter, and it's red in color. You can kind of see it in the panel here. When you see red if you've got a sight glass on your filter, when you see red in the sight glass, shut the pump off. That means this cleaner is in the sand. Let it soak in there for a couple of hours and then backwash it out. This shampoos the sand, and typically, Tony, how long do you recommend people, how often do they change the sand?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years, so if you're...
For a residential pool, let me expand, for residential pools, 5 years, commercial pools, 3 years.
Okay, so if you're gonna change the sand next spring, probably could disregard this, but definitely if you're not gonna change the sand next spring, definitely wanna chemically clean the filter. Those of you with sand filters, On in-ground pools, probably the best method is to add this through the pump pot on the front of the pump. So you turn the pump off, put the filter in the backwash position, pour this into the pump pot, put the lid back on, and then just turn the pump on for a few seconds. That will transfer this cleaner from the pump to the filter, shut it off, let it soak for a couple of hours, and then backwash it out. That'll shampoo the sand. Real important, because otherwise if we put the sand filter to bed and the water's getting cold, the greases and oils that backwashing doesn't remove, that stuff will harden in there and you're not gonna get good filter performance next spring. The other housekeeping chore, if you've got any kind of a water line buildup, like a scum line, a mineral deposit, there's a cleaner like off the wall. This is a thick liquid that you can put on a scrub brush, wipe it around the water line. This will remove scale deposits, grease and oil, those types of things real nicely. Because again, it's kind of the same principle as cleaning the filter. If we leave that water line on the pool all winter, it can become a little bit more permanent or a lot harder to remove next spring. So we've got the water balanced, we took care of the housekeeping chores. Now we're ready to put in the winterizing chemicals. And it's pretty simple. There's really just two products in these kits. We have two sizes of winter kits, up to 12,000 gallons, up to 24,000 gallons. And we'd rather round up, say you've got a 5,000 gallon above ground pool. You could conceivably put the whole kit in or put half of it in now, half of it in the spring. If you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, we'd put the whole 24,000 gallon kit in. We'd rather overdose the pool than underdose it. And in the kit, there's two products that I'll go over here in just a second. Some money-saving coupons, a winterization guide. The first product that we're gonna add, this is a 2-pound bottle of what we call Arctic Blue Shock. And this is gonna do a couple of different things. It's gonna establish a fairly high chlorine level. It's also gonna oxidize any contaminants out of the water to help clear up the water real quick. Again, it's a 2-pound bottle. The 24,000 gallon kit has 2 bottles. The 12,000 gallon kit has 1 bottle. You just add this around the edge of the pool, let the pool circulate for about an hour until you go to the next step. You don't need to pre-dissolve this, add it straight to the pool. It's not gonna affect the pH, and very, very fast dissolving. The second product that we're gonna put in, this is a long-lasting winter algicide. So that's gonna help keep the water clear, keep a high chlorine level. This is gonna put a long-lasting preventative algicide in the pool so we don't get algae. The 12,000 gallon kit has a pint, the 24,000 gallon kit has a quart. Add this directly to the pool, let the pool circulate for a few hours, and from a chemistry standpoint, those are the two main things that we're gonna do. We're gonna put a high level of chlorine, put a long-lasting algicide in the water, and then to help protect the pool and the equipment, the last product that we're gonna put in is called Pool Closing Complete. And this product does really 4 things. This will help prevent corrosion because the water is more corrosive during the winter. It has a scale inhibitor to prevent any scale buildup. If there's any trace metals in the water, it will prevent the trace metals from causing staining. And it also prevents a water line buildup over the winter. This is basically a half gallon. You put the whole bottle in, up to 25,000 gallons of water. Does anybody have a white plaster pool? You have a white plaster, a couple of you have white plaster pools. So there is one other thing that we can put in white plaster pools that we can't really use in vinyl or fiberglass pools. This is called a Arctic Blue Winter Floater. And this is basically a disposable chlorine floater. This has 3.5 pounds of chlorine tablets in it. You put this in the pool, there's some holes that you poke in here and it keeps a little more trickle of chlorine going into the pool all winter to give you a little bit added protection. Those of you with vinyl or fiberglass pools, we can't put this in. It's a little bit too strong for those pools and could bleach the liner. So in those pools, really what we recommend, because people always ask me, if I go back to the picture of the winter kits, people always ask, how long are these kits gonna last? How long is it gonna keep the pool from turning into the green swamp? It really depends on a few factors. It depends on, did you wait until the water temperature got below 65 degrees before you closed it? Did you clean it real good so the water was clean, no debris in the pool, extra you know, clear and clean, that's gonna affect it. And then the other thing would be, do you cover the pool? So how many of you don't cover the pool, leave it open all winter? Anybody? So you all cover the pool? Okay. So how many of you put a mesh cover on the pool? A few of you, and how many have solid covers? So a few solid covers. So if you think about this, from a chemistry standpoint, if you don't cover the pool, obviously there's rain and snow and debris getting in the pool, the chemicals aren't gonna last as long. If you've got a mesh cover, you're still gonna get rain and some fine debris. It's gonna last longer than not covering it, but not as long as a solid cover. And there's pros and cons to all the covers. It is, and I'm not trying to push you one way or the other, but if you've got a solid cover, from a chemical standpoint, the chemicals last longer. If you've got a mesh cover, it's gonna last longer than not covering it. And so the bottom line is, what we recommend is when, maybe around, say, Valentine's Day, bring a water sample into the store here, have them just check your chlorine level and see where you're at, because we may just need to put another bottle of winter shock in. Maybe you don't need anything, maybe it's still good, but it's a good time to double check the water, because we really don't know how long the winterizing chemicals will last. Sometimes they'll go all the way to Memorial Day, sometimes they might not go, you know, until Easter. You might need to put some more product in. So from a chemistry standpoint, the winter kit, the pool closing complete, if you've got a white plaster pool, the Arctic Blue floater. Yes, sir.
Now I got a 28,000 gallon indoor pool.
28,000 gallon indoor pool, and you're gonna, you lock it up, you close it up for the,
Yeah.
for the winter?
We usually winterize the equipment or drain it so we don't get a freeze through the pipes or the furnace or anything that's
Yeah.
going on there.
Do you lower the water level a little too then?
Normally not,
No, but you drain all the water out of the equipment?
yes.
So with you not being subject to the weather outside, probably the 24,000 gallon kit would be enough for you.
Either that or in the mechanical room, we run a heater when we need to, when it's freezing up.
You run a heater, a heater in the room to keep the equipment from freezing?
Yeah, to keep the pump and
Yeah.
the sand filter from freezing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about the freeze damage protection in a second. Nobody in here is using soft swim, this is just another way to treat a pool instead of chlorine. Okay, so we just went through pretty quickly the chemical treatment for a pool. It's really not that involved. You gotta get the water balanced, housekeeping chores, put the winter kit in, pool closing complete, and then it's up to you to come back into the store early next spring when the weather starts to warm up to have them double check the water. The next piece is really important as well. This is the freeze damage protection piece. And so, how many of you have not ever gone through a winter before with their swimming pool? Okay, a few of you. And so, here in the Portland area, where we typically don't get that hard of freezing temperatures, we don't necessarily winterize pools like they do in Eastern Oregon or Eastern Washington. In fact, a lot of folks, do any of you just run the pump 24 hours a day, 365 days a year?
Well, that's the question I was gonna ask. Would you leave the pump running at all times?
Some people do. The gentleman in the back does. I know
Yeah,
a
we
lot
do.
of people. I know a lot of people that do.
Just like set it on one instead of, I mean, we've got a setting of 4 different, 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the month.
You got a variable speed pump?
Correct.
Yeah, you
So
can.
just put it on one and just run it.
You can. And so there's kind of 3 different methods. You could run it 24 hours a day like the gentleman in the back does, and a lot of people do. Because here's what we're trying to avoid. We never want the water not
Freeze,
moving
yeah.
when we get freezing temperatures. So some people, once they do this winterization, the chemical treatment, they turn the pump off and then wait to watch the weather report, and when we get freezing temperatures, boom, they kick it on. Or, like you were suggesting, you could just keep it on a trickle. And then there's the way people winterize the pool in Eastern Oregon. Yes, sir?
Can you just drain the water out of the equipment so it doesn't risk freezing?
You could. So if you do that, yours is an in-ground pool?
It's above ground.
Above ground? Yes, and a lot of above ground pools, that's probably almost the best method. drain the water down below the skimmer, drain all the water out of the equipment. In fact, some people, if it's not too heavy, you'll drain the water, put it in the garage.
I was gonna ask that, so I disconnect all my hoses and everything.
Yes.
And disconnect the filter and disconnect everything.
For an above ground pool,
Yeah.
that's probably the
Okay.
best way to
Okay.
do it, because now all you've got is that body of water, and like I was saying earlier, we don't care really if the water in the pool freezes, because it's kinda like an ice tray, you know, water freezes an ice tray and it doesn't break the container, it's not gonna break the pool. And so,
How far do you wanna go below the, do you wanna go to the return for when you drain the water? I drain the water, so do you go to the return or how far?
below the skimmer,
Below the skimmer. so
yeah,
it's about like the-
yeah, below the skimmer, and Tony, do you guys sell the face plates?
No, I'm familiar with them, we don't sell them. There's obviously many different types of skimmers.
Yeah.
Some of these more simple Intex kind of branded pools will not have a legitimate square mouth skimmer, it's more of a hole in the side of the pool wall. So in reality, if you're gonna disconnect your equipment and remove all your hoses, you almost have to take the water below the bottom hole, so to speak. And that's, I think, typically the return.
That's
Yeah.
about what I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's good point, Tony. So,
Just-
yeah.
just-
If you don't have a way to cap it off, that is, if you
Yeah.
don't have a way to plug it.
Yep. But in in-ground pools we can't just really drain the water out of the equipment, because there's still gonna be some water in the pipes that could potentially freeze and break. So we need to be careful of that. So like what they do in Eastern Oregon, in fact, I'm gonna show some slides here in a second, so I'll go over that in a minute. But pretty much for here, we're in a milder climate where it may freeze or may not freeze, is we just need to make sure that the water's moving, is really the critical thing, that the water's moving. We don't have to heat the water, you don't have to turn your heater on when we get freezing temperatures, we just need to make sure that the water is moving. And that's typically the way most people winterize here in the Portland metro areas, make sure the water's moving when we get freezing temperatures. In colder climates like Eastern Washington, or even some people here in the Portland area with the in-ground pools, they'll winterize the pools like they do in Eastern Oregon, where they'll drop the water level down below the returns or below the skimmer, below the water out of the lines. Basically, they evacuate all the water out except for the pool itself. There's no water in the plumbing lines, there's no water in the equipment. They'll cap these holes off. I mean, you can't blow the lines even with water above the returns. You guys winterize a few pools, don't you, Tony, the service department?
Yes, oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna just pause your thought for a second, Randy.
Yeah.
Maybe for some of the newer pool owners, it might be worth just in quick defining what a return and what a skimmer is, just for what it's worth.
Yeah, so, you know, the skimmer is that white box at the top of the pool, it's got the little flapper gate in there, that, you know, during the season, that's what gives the skimming action, that draws the dirt and debris in there. So in the harder weather areas where we drop that water down below the skimmer, the returns, that's where the water's coming back into the pool. And there's a couple of different methods, depending on who built your pool. In fact, if you're a new pool owner and you know who built your in-ground pool, you might wanna call the pool builder and ask them their recommendations, because some pool builders will have you drain it down below the returns, they blow the lines out, and then they cap them and fill the pool back up. There's a few different methods. Yes, sir.
My returns are right on the bottom of the pool.
Your what are the
Return.
the returns?
Mhm.
So obviously you can't, you know, with all the returns, you got the little pop-up.
Yeah, there are two returns which are right on the bottom.
Yeah,
On the shelf, right?
that's okay. So how are you gonna winterize the pool? Are you gonna keep it?
That's what I'm asking you now. So what do I do if I have to, I can't totally, empty those pipes?
No, so you probably would wanna just keep it running. You just wanna keep, when we get freezing
Because every
temperatures.
time I have gotten it done from them and others, they just basically have drained the equipment and nothing.
Okay. So if they're comfortable doing that and you don't have any plumbing lines exposed that could freeze, that would be my only concern.
They're all in the ground, going like all in the ground.
I know they're all underground, but you could if we had a really, I mean, we typically don't get the hard freezes, but who knows? You never know. You know, sometimes we'll get one of those weird years where we'll get freezing temperatures for a week or two, and then the water can freeze down a little bit in the plumbing lines. That's why in eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, they blow all the lines out. They'll even put a little bit of RV antifreeze in because they want to make sure that there's no potential. Because you can imagine if the plumbing lines under the deck freeze
Yeah.
and break, that's a major expense. So we definitely want to avoid that. And so this slide shows protecting the skimmer. And again, this is if you're going to only do the drain down method. We want to make sure that when it rains and we get water in the skimmer, that if that water freezes, it can't expand and break. So in some cases, we'll put a device like this in the skimmer. This screws down into the skimmer, so when water gets into the skimmer and it freezes, this absorbs the expansion. It breaks up the ice. This protects the skimmer from freeze damage. This is the faceplate that I was talking about that sometimes people will put on. So we definitely need to protect the skimmer, and then drain all the water out of the equipment, out of the filter, out of the pump, out of the heater. This is the way they winterized in eastern Oregon. This would be the other method. Yes, sir.
One quick question, how often should you, replaster your pool? Mine's been in the ground for almost 20 years and I don't think it's ever been.
You know what, that's kind of the $1 million question. It
Okay.
really is how it looks
Okay.
and how it feels.
Okay,
Because if it's really coarse and aggressive and people get out and their feet are bleeding, you probably,
That's-
and that happens.
yeah,
And so then you probably want to replace it.
Okay.
But if you feel it and it's still soft and you're not seeing a lot of, etch marks, it's probably good. I mean, if it's, you're saying it's like
Well,
20 years
it's
old?
been yeah, at least that, and then I talked to a lady that ran it before me, and she says it hasn't been done in 10 to 15 years, when she was,
Yeah.
so it hasn't been done that long, and I don't know if it'd be recommended to have somebody come out and tell me if I need to redo it.
You know what? It's more on how it looks.
Okay.
It really is.
Okay.
I mean, if it's still soft, it's smooth, it's looking good.
Okay.
It's kind of one of those things, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My
But-
pool's been in since the mid-70s, and I've never replastered.
Haven't you?
No.
I think the plaster was better in the olden days. I really do.
Yeah.
I got a couple of black algae spots.
Yeah.
I don't even have that, so.
And so it really is one of those
Okay.
things. If it's smooth, looks good, it's more of the one that when it's time to replaster is when it's etched and you've got staining that won't go away, that kind of thing. If yours is still looking good, I wouldn't mess with it.
Okay, thank you.
You're right. So again, drain all the water out of the equipment, all the pieces of equipment, and that's the other method of winterizing a pool. Any questions on that, especially for you in-ground pool people, the above-ground people? You got a little bit easier disconnecting the equipment, putting it in the garage. That's really the best way to go. So then, deciding on a cover. So these two covers here, that's a solid cover on an above-ground pool, solid cover on an in-ground pool. On in-ground pools, one of the things that's real important, if you have a solid cover, is how you're gonna install this. They're typically held down by water tubes, that's what these are. And you wanna make sure that the cover is not tight, so it comes out over the deck, straight down the wall, across the pool, up the other side, because obviously when we get rain and snow, if it's tight, it's gonna pull the cover into the pool. So we want it fitting real nicely on the pool so that doesn't happen. When we get the rain, if you get too much rain on top of the cover, you wanna pump some of that water off periodically. From a chemical standpoint, this is probably the best cover. The downside to a solid cover is you get a pool on top of the pool, right? You gotta pump some of that water off, and you wanna be real careful taking the cover off next spring so you don't dump all that leaves and debris into the pool. But those covers work real well. When you take your cover off next spring, we have a cleaner that allows you to put it away so it won't mold and mildew over the summer. It's called Stowaway. So we clean our solar blanket then. Also now, do any of you normally keep solar blankets on your pool during the summer? So you definitely want to take those off, and we can use this cleaner to clean those as well, because it's not going to hurt the pool any by keeping that cover on, but it's going to cut the life of the cover down. they're meant to keep the heat in. Those little blue bubbles tend to get brittle in cold water, and then you might notice a bunch of blue little polka dots on the bottom of the pool next spring. So definitely want to avoid that. And then we've got mesh or safety covers. Is that what you have? And so that's a safety cover, but there's also mesh tarp type covers. These allow rain and some fine debris into the pool. But a lot of people like these because they are truly a safety cover. You can, you know, if a little kid happens to wander out onto the cover, they could still, you know, they're not going to drown. So these work real nice. But if you have a mesh cover, definitely get in early next spring or late winter to have a water test done. Anybody have an automatic cover? No automatic covers. So we'll need to talk about those. And then nobody leaves their pool uncovered. If you ever choose to leave your pool uncovered, which is fine, some people, you know, just like the look of the pool in the backyard, just a little bit more maintenance involved. Because if you get debris into a pool like this, you still would want to vacuum it out, because leaves, pine needles, debris laying on the bottom of the pool can stain the pool. So that's the other side of it. If you leave the pool open, you definitely want to be able to vacuum periodically to get that debris out. Again, this talks about not closing your pool too soon. Really, this is about the right time of year. When we get to the end of September to the middle of October, that's typically the time that we recommend winterizing your pool. So, you know, several of you said you're in the, you know, mid to high 60s. We're getting pretty close to winterize the pool. And again, I can't really stress enough, next spring, after you put the winterization chemicals in, come in early next spring, have Tony and his staff here test the water, make sure we've got enough chlorine, because really the key thing is when we run out of chlorine, when that chlorine level gets below 1 part per million, that's when all the bad stuff happens. That's when algae starts to grow, bacteria starts to grow. And so if you do a quick test yourself or bring a sample into Tony and his staff here, they can tell you, you know, we might just need to add another, you know, 1 bottle of Arctic Blue Shock to kind of top the level up to get you through until Memorial Day if that's when you choose to open your pool. One of the things that the Pool and Spa House did earlier this year, they do have a text reminder service. So if you text Summer Fun to this phone number right here, they send out, they're kind of random reminders.
They probably send out 6 to 8.
Yeah, so they're not
reminders
gonna
of summer.
bother you, but they would send out a reminder like in you know, around Valentine's Day or in March. Hey, we've gotten some good weather. It might be a good time to bring a water sample in to make sure that we can have it analyzed. So just, they're not gonna, you know, bombard you with text, but just pertinent reminders. It might be during the summer when it gets real hot, might be a good time to put an extra dose of algicide in, those kind of things. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question
Yeah.
about the algaecide. You know, keep putting the algaecide in. How long do they live? I mean, do they start to concentrate in the pool over time?
No, the algicides dissipate. Some of them get
How
filtered
fast?
out.
How fast?
Well, that's why, so like during the summer, that's why we recommend adding a preventative algicide every week, because it's gonna dissipate that quick. It's also, you know, when we were talking about putting the algicide in when we winterize, we're basically putting, you might say the whole season, the amount of algicide you would add for the whole season during the summer, we're putting this in up front during the winter. So you shouldn't have to add, you know, unless we get a really mild winter, you probably won't have to add this again. But these, you know, when we put this high a dosage in, this is, we want to put this in so it's going to last, you know, 4 or 5 months. Any other questions? We are going to be giving out, anybody that didn't get one yet, we are going to be giving out a free bottle of Pool Complete. If you didn't use this summer, this is really for the summer. Don't put this in now, save this for next summer. This is a product that's it's a water clarifier that makes the water extra clear, helps prevent waterline buildup, keeps phosphates out of the water, which can contribute to algae growth. And so this is typically enough for at least a few weeks worth. Take that home with you and try that next summer. Tony, anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. We are grateful for you and your time that you took tonight to come, and we trust that it was a lot of good information. We'll be around afterwards, again, to answer any questions that you might have. But anyway, we want to thank you for coming.